What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Aether Hour. This time we are joined by two new guests. We have two of our QA testers, Kyle and Bianca, with us. And they're going to be talking about their experience testing the game, maybe some funny bugs that they found, and just generally what being a tester entails. So I think that's maybe a good way to just jump right into it, because I think a lot of people, when they think of a QA person or a tester, they're just thinking like, oh, you just sit around and you play video games all day, right? So what exactly does your job entail, and how does it deviate from just playing games? Maybe Bianca, start with you.
Yeah, of course. So how does it differ? I think probably the most important part of it differing is we are functional testing most of the time rather than actual ad hocing, which is what playing the game would feel like. So ad hocing could easily be probably like the last 10% of a project or 5%, and most of it's just functional, always trying to hammer on issues that we find. So I think that's probably a good starting point. Is it would be nice, but sometimes you're testing a loading screen for 3 hours of your day over and over and over again. It
Yeah.
just depends.
Yeah, no, yeah, you pretty much nailed it on the head. Because, like, on paper, it's everyone's like, oh, cool, you just play a game all day. And realistically, I start my day and go, what if pause doesn't work on every menu in the game? And then you spend an hour on it, and it's like, this is a really dumb thing. Why am I doing this? And then you get to the 98th screen, and it doesn't work. And you're like, damn, I was right. I should check the other 200. What
Yeah,
happens?
So,
can you
so
die everywhere? Like it's just things like that.
in
Yeah.
a scenario like that, is it pre-existing issues you've encountered before? Is it do you have any sort of like programmatic knowledge that you think something like this could happen? Like, where do you even get these ideas in your head to begin questioning like what might be potentially broken?
At least for me, it's my favorite part of QA is you listen to the really stupid voice in the back of your head, where it's
Okay.
like you start a racing game and like, what if I just go backwards? Like, what if I just ignore everything in front of me? What if you hand me an important object in a game and I just threw it into the ocean? What happens? And then it's one step to listen to that, and then you have to be smart and go, okay, but what happens if I do this, if I apply that logic elsewhere? And then you start systematically figuring out like kind of the weak points in games that either people take for granted, they just do naturally, or which is a very realistic thing, sometimes it's just an oversight. Sometimes no one, like, play an RPG and go, what if we put the heaviest armor on the healer? And most people be like, why? Why would you do that? And it's like, why not? Let's find out. And then
Yeah.
you kind of start getting an instinct for that slowly and surely.
That's
So
interesting.
it's letting the intrusive thoughts win sometimes.
Yeah, I would also think it'd be like kind of thinking outside the box and gathering up years and years of edge cases that kind of just keep forming. So it's just, a lot of that.
Yeah, and how do you kind of get into QA? Is it like you just, you apply to a job, you're like, hey, I have a lot of experience playing video games, like how does that experience sort of build up over time? And like, how it's like, how can you learn to be a better QA person? Is it just the experience of playing and understanding how things work little by little? Like, I feel like with other disciplines like art or music or whatever, there's kind of like a structure for learning how to improve at your work. But for QA, it's almost like a process of doing, it seems like.
I think really quickly, QA is in everything when you think about it. Like every process, you can QA people, you can QA documentation. It just depends on what craft you're doing. So there is a point where you want to try every game. There's not a lot of games that are super different if you're in one genre. Like battle royales kind of tend to be first-person shooters and stuff like that. So it's getting a genre or like a wide range of genres that you have under your belt, like live service, or it could be RPGs, it could be narrative games like this one. It
Yeah.
just, I guess it depends on like what kind of like QA person do you want to be at the end of the day? Like, do you want to be the person who cracks all the class A crash bugs, or do you want to be that functional tester who finds the technical bugs that, might get missed by, regular gamers? It just depends.
So is your day-to-day process like what is the structure, I guess, especially for a game like ours that has become so massive? Is it like you're doing full playthroughs? Are you going into a specific scene or a combat scenario and just playing it over and over again, like, or does it kind of vary day to day?
I find it really depends on what's currently happening in the game, where it's like, oh, we added this new type of combat scenario. That it's like, oh, then let's go over combat and just take a look at it, make sure it's all good. Sometimes you just wake up one day and you're like, wow, we haven't taken a look at shops in a while. Let's take a look at shops. And there are times too where it's just playing the game naturally, just without really thinking, and then kind of your instinct as just a regular gamer will sometimes kick in. Like there was a little while where I'm like, oh, I haven't played the game in controller for like, I haven't checked that out. So I played it, and then as I'm pushing buttons, I'm like, oh, why does it feel weird to go between menus? Oh, it's because in other games you push this and it works like this, and it doesn't work like that in our game. Let me put a ticket on that kind of thing. So it's both very measured and also spontaneous. Yeah.
So do either of you guys have like engine experience, or is it mostly just like playing the game on surface level and writing down the bug that you see and letting the engineers sort of take care of the issue?
Yeah, so I think depending on what kind of QA that you start off as, I started off as a publisher QA, so I only had really build only experience. So we'd get builds from Steam, and then I transitioned into a developer QA the majority of my career. So it's like we're either in engine or we're using batch files to actually launch the game, rather than using any kind of player faced launcher like Steam or localized ones that came from the developer. So yeah, I would say yes to that question. And then I know given our backgrounds, we've worn different hats as the industry goes on. As you transition from different areas, different studios, you might wear one or hat, two hat, three hats, four hats. But yeah, I would say yes.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And has there been any crazy learning curve if someone's asking you to dive into the engine? Have you used different engines, or is it mostly Unity for and also, I guess, sorry, I'm jumping around, but like, has your guys' experience mostly been indie, or have you had more AAA or AA experience as well?
Speaking on for me, it's I've had different experiences on different engines. Like I've done Unreal, I've done Unity, I did Frostbite when I was working over at BioWare, and like to answer your learning curve question, the very first time I really worked in Frostbite, my boss just told me to open Frostbite, threw me into an ability, and he's like, "Make your own, just do it." And I'm like, "What?" And I spent like a week putting bees on a fireball, and that's all I did. And I didn't do anything productive, but it really helped teach me how the different components in the engine really works, so that when you start testing for proper bugs, you can kind of diagnose, oh, the distance stat is different from the radius stat because I hooked up this ability. I put bees in a jar one time, so now I know how containers work. Yeah, I find that stuff to be pretty helpful.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's always like a layer deeper, understanding how different actors and things like that work in the environments and stuff. For me, I have most of my experience in Unreal Engine. That's what I mostly was, besides Nintendo's own like developer engine that they have. That's probably where most of my experience lies. And then it's Unity. So
Nice.
it was kind of like the opposite. But yeah, I think probably the biggest learning code is just probably learning how to just code more, essentially. Being thrown into the fire that way is kind of just being like, hey, no one likes these tools. Can you work on them? And it's like, sure. No, go figure. No one likes localization in gaming.
Oh man.
It's always the last thing besides audio. No offense, audio. We love you guys. But yeah, it's just, yeah. So I was trying to fix tools as QA, as one does,
That's cool.
things like that.
We've mentioned this before, but it's almost like the most mundane things can be the most difficult to put together and to program. So, do you guys find after testing so many games that it's mostly the dumb stuff that ends up being the worst issues? Or is it a bit of everything? Or is there like a recurring theme? Like, you had talked about like shooters. Like, is it, I don't know, the way the aim works on shooters typically, or whatever it might be?
Doors.
Doors?
Doors are the worst.
Doors.
Doors are terrible. You think doors are the easiest thing on the planet because it's a plank of wood that rotates, but that thing is a nightmare. It just sometimes flat out doesn't work. It might have to be tied to an event that doesn't fire. Sometimes the physics behind it doesn't work. There is a great story that I recently read about for they were doing some port work for Half-Life 2. And turns out for ages, one of the specific doors didn't work properly because when it opened, it would hit the toe of an NPC and the door would stop and the game would lock up. But the game shipped with it just fine, and it's because of the way the physics work. The door barely nudged the NPC out of the way and opened fully. So whenever in all possible versions of the game, when you play it, that door just might not open nicely at all and just soft lock it. But no one noticed it because the physics perfectly worked every time. Doors suck. Doors are terrible.
That's amazing.
Doors. I feel like we wouldn't have like a developer conversation without mentioning doors at least once. It's the bane of QA. It's the bane of design. Like, it's just always there. Doors.
If a door is like a pixel off in like how it's like stacked on like the floor, game over. And like it's so hard to find. It's so hard to align to make sure that like your volumes are just like perfectly level. Like you're getting into like like I said, like the pixel view of like alignment. And then like you align it on one side, and then on the other side where you can't see it, now it's misaligned. You're like, I hate everything. Or like,
and your NPCs are gonna catch it. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like you have to move the whole world or like that whole space. You have to like adjust it just down by one. And of course, like in tool sets, it's not as easy as like select all, drop down by like 1 unit. It's move this, then move that, then move this, then move that. And then like now my scripting is all messed up. Like you've got an elevator or a moving platform, and that's designed to go back up here. So like you move the world down by like a unit, but then that elevator will snap up to its previous location to do its animation, and it will snap back down. Or like a character doing an animation. It's like it's anything where you're interacting with like volumetric spaces is just a pain in the butt.
Yeah, you go through all that effort, and then you're like, everything's A-okay, it works just fine, and then you watch someone walk up, touch the door, and because they're too close to it, the door doesn't open. And it's like, well, damn. The door is now closed, but it's categorized as open, and we can't do anything about it. Great. I hate doors.
For me, it was when I was doing QA, it was pathfinding, specifically follower pathfinding, because they'll do their own thing. Like their AI is set to either like follow you like to a certain distance, and then like if you stop, they'll like move around you so they can form like a natural conversation pose. But then like they'll either like clip through walls or through static meshes or objects on the ground or through a door, or like they'll get stuck somewhere and you can't interact with something that you need to get to because they're in the way and you can't effectively move them. Like it was, and like it's so hard to repro. You're just like, here's a video, it happened, clearly you can see it. Good luck reproing 1 out of 30 times. Godspeed, dev. I swear I don't hate you, but good luck.
It's always worse.
It's okay. God, sorry. Cody brought something up that like ignites something in me. The worst part about like doing some QA testing is when an issue is inconsistent and you feel like a crazy person being like, I swear when you hop on this horse you will explode, and everyone goes, no, we tried it, it didn't work. And then you sit down, you record video of it, and it's like finding a picture of Bigfoot where it's like, I can get this once and only once, I know it exists. And everyone looks at you and goes, we don't know how to fix this. It's like, dang, cool.
Yeah.
And when I was doing QA on Dragon Age 2, there was the game had come out, and we were getting reports of people's PlayStation 3s dying spontaneously while playing Dragon Age 2. We're like, oh, that's weird. We haven't encountered any of that. And it was always at a specific spot. And I was like the main PS3 tester. So I spent hours just getting to this one spot in the game and then moving on a little bit past it to see if I could get it to crash. see if I can get to kill a PS3. The answer was no. And this is when you learn as like a QA person that like consoles may have the same specs across all the machines, but not every console is made the same.
They're not the same.
We bought, and this was like when they were like $500-$600 still, like they were still stupid expensive. We had to go out and buy like 50 retail boxes of PlayStations, and I just like would cruise through them trying to play it. And it was like, eventually we figured out that there was like a 1 in 80 chance or like a 1 in 100 chance that if you interacted with one item in one level in a very specific way at a very specific time, it would kill one of the SPUs and the cell processor in the PS3, and that would cause a domino chain reaction that would just nuke it from orbit. And then it would die, and that was a game over. You were never getting your PlayStation back.
I feel like that's like the essence of QA right there. That's the essence of QA. It's like, it's not like the fun enjoyment of playing the game. It's like you literally went through 60 dev kits, played it up to a certain point in the game, and then went back and did it again.
Yeah.
And then again.
And you know what's happening because you're getting reports from like the outside community of like, this is a serious issue. And you're like, oh crap, this is bad. And you cannot repro it if your life depended on it. It was like a 7-month process. I remember we found the fix for it like right before I left BioWare. And it was like vindication. It felt so good.
That's crazy. What could it have been that would crash it that bad?
The cell was really hard to program for, and like we look at it back now, like it's still a pain in the butt, but like we're more used to multi-core processors and stuff like that. But just like how the dev kits worked and just developing for the PlayStation 3 in general was just an abysmal nightmare compared to almost everything else.
I see.
So it's like one of those things of like, it worked fine on an Xbox, it worked fine on PC, but for whatever reason, it'd be this line of code, and then the SPU would get stuck on it, and there would be no recovery from it. It would just kind of hang up there, and even if you powered it on off again, it would like be stored in a weird spot of like the individual processor's memory, and that was it. There were other ones too of like, I remember on like Mass Effect 2, we soak tested the game for a while, but apparently not long enough. Like we would do like 24-hour soak tests where you just like let it run, and everything would be fine. And then you come in, you turn it off, you restart it, and like, oh, like no one on this planet's gonna play Mass Effect 2 for more than 24 hours in a single sitting. That's absurd. No, if you got to 38 hours, it would destroy the PlayStation's hard drive. Like it would just run out of like writable memory in the hard drive and nuke it, and then that would be it for the hard drive. You could like, it wouldn't kill the whole PlayStation, but it would kill the hard drive. And you're like, why? It's the year, I guess, 2010.
Yeah.
Why are we doing this?
Memory leaks are fun.
That's insane. So I know most of the job is to report the bugs. I'm assuming there's times when you're like, hey, I think this might be the solution. Is there a common thing where you're like, I've seen this a million times. I always know it's this thing that is the problem. Is that something that ever happens, or is it really like game to game is kind of different?
I don't know. I think I've kind of had the blessing of working on a variety of different games, so it's kind of hard to like nail down and be like, this is a similar bug, because it's like the last game I worked on was an RPG game, and then before that it was a colony sim,
Gotcha.
and then before that, like it's just like the range is so different because you can't compare colony sim to RPG game to our game. It's just the systems inherently are different. But if you're consistently working on like one game, that's very similar, I feel like that probably you might be able to do that easily. But it just depends on your experience, I feel.
Yeah.
I feel like there's certain stuff you can find that has like, it's almost like the pitfalls of everything, like
like doors.
Like doors. The first game I ever worked on, we had like a slider for a character customization, and turns out that going maximum went to like 105, and then going all the way left was 0. So you could go all the way to the right, back it off a bit, and then go back forward again. And because of the way the sliders were set, you could keep going forward. So you could always make like your nose grow an absurd amount, but you can't shrink it back.
Yeah.
So you get stuff like that where it's like you find it once and you're like, that's interesting, and then every time I see a slider, I'm like, what if I just go back and forth? Let's see what happens. So there are pit traps, but yeah, no, there's so much nuance between each project or even each genre that it's like, damn, there's a lot to cover.
Yeah. So maybe let's talk about our game for a little bit. Like what I don't know, what's been really difficult to test, and is there an element of the game, whether it's combat or the narrative stuff or whatever, that you feel like you've focused a little bit more on in terms of things that need to be looked out for? Like, I know combat, for example, has got to be a beast just because of how much variety there is in the different cars and the equipment and stuff like that. So, like, is that like maybe the biggest thing that you're spending the most time with, or is it just like going through the game, or?
For me, at least, because a lot of my background is in RPGs, it is that like inventory management, the characters, the like leveling up, how you build stuff. That's just stuff I naturally gravitates towards. So there is a lot of instances like that where it's like, what if I grab one person and just move them into a different type of vehicle? Like, what if we get a vehicle that's built for healing and I make it a damage dealer for no goddamn reason?
Yeah.
As you should.
As you should. And then sometimes too, it's like both trying to exploit the game and also sometimes just to pure natural mistakes. You'll run into different parts of like gameplay and systems where early on when I was testing, I got myself in a terrible state because I found out that if I moved one person to a different vehicle, I couldn't move them back. So I was like, oh crap, I'm stuck with a really bad setup. And that's just because I was just naturally moving people around. So yeah, so at least for me, it's a lot of like toying with the mechanics specifically is always a fun little adventure for me.
Have you found any cool like car builds from doing these weird kind of like making a healer a tank kind of thing?
My favorite, which I don't think is useful at all.
Okay.
I love slapping every movement ability on a car and just zipping through things. So it's like I'll jump on one vehicle, do damage that way. Then I switcheroo this other guy. Then I push this guy over here, and then we swap positions that way. I do maybe 6 damage, but it's so much goddamn fun.
Yeah.
I
That's
always
cool.
love using the environment and trying to use the environment as much as possible on these things, and I'm always trying to shoo the enemies into that. So I think that's like I feel like when you find something that you love to do, you try to see how possible is it or how not possible is it to do the thing, and that I feel like that's always pretty fun. Another little edge case kind of thing you might do, but it's just I think trying to find the joy out of what repetitiveness you can do is great.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Even
go
even
ahead.
in our demo, sorry, we have like you can just go in and start playing combat. But on the narrative side, there are so many choices and avenues you can go down. Do we have, and I'm not sure that we do, but do we have testing tools where you can go through and sort of explore the narrative options, or are you going through and manually playing through those storylines every time? And if there is a tool, is that as useful as just playing through, with that sort of ad hoc testing?
It so that's a tricky one because in game development we'll usually have a lot of debug options. A lot of like in our game right now, we have a way to almost fudge the dice roll so you're guaranteed succeeding on your next roll or something like that. Typically it's not uncommon to see like here is a debug command for jumping into step 4 of a quest where you make this decision. It's all pre-built for you. But in general, relying on debug can be a bit of a problem sometimes because either debug tools aren't maintained or up to date. Sometimes debug itself has some oversights for it. Like if you skip like 6 different quest parts and jump straight into the middle of it, oh, there was this little bit that you were supposed to hit up that just wasn't programmed in.
Yeah,
So
I can
if you
actually
test
give
using that, yeah.
a specific example of that when I was playtesting earlier in the project. Is if you skip, I don't know, to like whatever the next chapter is after you meet Cress, you're supposed to be able to give her the album to be able to actually like proceed in that conversation, to proceed the quest. But James didn't unlock the album for us to be able to give to her if you skipped ahead. So it's kind of like you just got stuck. And that was an example of what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So like in an ideal world, we would use all these tools to zip zap go through. But honestly, going naturally, as big of a pain in the ass as it is, it's really really handy for finding those natural
Hmm.
flow points. So yeah,
Yeah, as the
Yeah.
player would, naturally, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
part of
I
it is
keep
like sometimes how the games are made. In narrative games, you can have kind of there's two ways you can do it. You can have like a branching event or a choice event, and then you can set a condition or like a tag based off the choice that you make. And sometimes that just makes it fresh. Like you either picked option A or B, and then you set like you can have a variable set that's like chose option A or chose option B, and it sets one of the two. And then other times in games, there's basically you can have a tag and you have all of the choices that you can make, and then they have like equals true or equals false, like it's a Boolean yes no. And then the benefit to the latter system or the former system is that you get a lot of control and a lot of variability based off of that because you're not necessarily confined to like an A or a B choice. The downside is that it does make debugging a lot more complex because you have to set, if you don't have the debug tools to set those flags kind of initially, or we're not setting them like progressively to some sort of option as you skip through, you'll run into a lot of like what we call soft locks or like blockers, basically, of like, oh, because we didn't have this set, that choice was invalid, and there's a conversation or a game event or a combat that was reliant on that choice being set at that point in time. The former will give you basically like the golden path or the critical path. Like you'll always have those options set, which is super handy, but you don't have as much control. You don't have as much variability because everything is either a yes or a no. And it sometimes can be a lot harder to spot when those things are missing because there's always something that's playing. So like you might not always see a bug hiding in plain sight because it's always progressing in some form. And if you don't know to look for that, that can be a problem. So there's pros and cons to both systems. And then, but yeah.
Well, especially in this game, it's like one thing always kind of leads to the next because it's like relatively linear. So, yeah, it's like you have to be thinking about all of those different things that need to unlock to get to the next step, whether it's a quest or an item or a character or a dialogue option or whatever. So, yeah, I could see how that can get really, really complicated really quickly. And I can also see how in your guys' position, testing a game like this can be crazy because of how much variety there is. In like a, I don't know, like a third person action game or something like that, obviously there's always going to be tons of opportunities for bugs, but it's kind of like, you're kind of looking more for like, a visual way to break something because you're able to like run around as a character, for example, and like run into walls or whatever. In this, it's more like you're having to do a lot of logic puzzles in your mind to see what you can break. So it's just kind of interesting. I think what would be cool to talk about is funny bugs that you guys have encountered, because even in the the limited amount I've played for capturing footage and just for just checking out the game in general, I found a couple in the past, that however long I've worked here, 8 months or whatever, that have been pretty cool. So the one that was hilarious to me was there at one point when you were upgrading Cress's truck. She has this like crane thing, and after a certain amount of time, the crane, all of the pieces just became detached and were like flying around in a cyclone around the truck. And I don't know, has anyone seen that one, or was that before you guys popped on?
I think
I
it
don't
might
think I've seen that one.
be
Okay.
before.
No, I think it's
yeah.
that too.
Because I want to know how they fixed it and what was wrong with it. I might just need to ask James later, because that one was like, how the heck could this happen? And then the other one that was funny that I think, I don't know if the answer, I don't know if I had the answer, but I proposed what I thought the answer was. But this is kind of a spoiler, so I'll be vague about it. But there's one point in which a character in a cutscene throws a bomb out their window, and the whole point of it is like they're throwing it out in time to avoid an explosion, right? Avoid themselves blowing up. But they throw the bomb out the window, and I would get a game over. And I think what was happening was the actual asset in the cutscene still had the explosion damage collider on it. and it was still like catching me and blowing me up, even though I was successful in the dialogue option to like pass that point. So that was another one that I thought was kind of funny. So what about you guys?
I think my favorite one is I found a way to remove Gia from the game.
Oh no.
You
What if
There's
she
a-
never existed? Perfect.
yeah, because Gia is never meant to leave the crew.
Yeah.
So I found a way to remove her, and when you remove her, you can't put her back in. So it's just an empty spot. And because you're allowed to like roll around without crew members, if you want to do just Gia, you could also remove everyone else, and you could play the game without anyone in your team. So when you start combat is like, all right, it's your turn, and then it just hangs forever because they're like, oh, no one's going. Weird. That's my favorite. Accidentally deleting the main character from our game.
Do you know
Yeah.
how they fixed that one?
I don't know, to be quite honest.
Okay. I'm
I'll
I'm
double
always
check on that
curious
one.
about the solutions to stuff like this, because a lot of
Yeah.
times it's like it's a dumb thing, right? It's like literally just one line of code
a flag.
or a button, even, right?
Yeah.
That box was not
Yeah,
picked off.
Next
Yeah.
time we have the engineering guys on, we'll have to have a little list of
we'll
our
grill them.
QA bugs. Yeah,
Why-
we'll have to
How did you
revisit
fix this one?
revisit QA's funny bugs.
Yeah. I think for me, it's always finding characters that aren't supposed to be in the scene, and it's great if I find them like multiple times. I'm like, wait a minute, you're talking to me, but you're also in the background, but you're also next to me at the same time in the scene. Like, I think those like are funny. Like, you're not supposed to be here, but you are here twice. Like, I think those are
You're
great.
holding
Yeah,
yourself. What's happening?
yeah. It's like, what are you're not in this conversation right now, please. I think those are my favorite. Like those little like, hey, asset art not there here, but yeah.
I had one in the vehicle customization menu of you can like spin the truck or the car or whatever around just by sliding the mouse across. So I just kept sliding my mouse across again and again and again, and it got faster and faster and faster until it's just like a blur of nothingness.
Yeah.
But you could slow it back down by going the other way. And I don't know if having one of these giant monitors was a factor in that or not, or if it even still exists. But yeah, I was just sliding my mouse from one side to the other to see how fast we could go.
That's
Yeah, I
funny.
was gonna say mine previously is like I always love when the wrong object spawns in the place of something.
Yeah.
So I think Kyle was the one who found this, but like later on, but like the midway point in the game, there's a sequence where you've got to like infiltrate basically a casino, and at some point you have to talk to someone to get access to an office building or to an office, and there's supposed to be like a little point of object interaction or point of interest interaction supposed to pop up there. But a whole building would spawn there in its place. So it would just be like looking inside of this building, and then there'd be a mini version of the building kind of right there, but like askew sideways, like slightly crooked. And I love stuff like that. That's always my favorite. But on the point of Gina's ultra wide comments, I recently acquired for testing one of the big like 49-inch Samsung Odyssey G9 monitors. It's like the really, really dumb aspect ratio. And how we handle 3D objects in the 2D narrative scenes has been super fun.
So good.
Because it's not just a 3D object existing in the 2D space. Generally, we're putting like a render texture on a flat object, and then based on your aspect ratio, based on your viewpoint, it'll slightly change as you like move the screen up and down or stuff like that. But on an ultra wide, the way that we were handling previously, the obscure or like the weird aspect ratio would be like we would zoom in enough so that it would fill the whole width of the screen. But that would cause these render textures, which are basically just flat 2D planes, to warp their perspective wildly.
Oh,
So
man.
we were on a meeting with our art director and Kyle and Bianca, and we'd like load into a scene. Like at first glance, everything looks fine, but then you like move up slightly, and then it just like Enterprise, Star Trek starts to like warp and distort crazily as like the screen goes up or the screen goes down. There's one scene early on, and like you completely in the demo where Gia and Nellie roll up to the taxi platform in Gia's car, and it's super duper flat because the whole screen is zoomed in so much to fill the whole width, the whole resolution. The car is like a pancake, and then all of the other kind of like 3D elements in the scene are just like layered weirdly. So like it breaks visually really, really badly on the ultra wide. So, sometimes it's the things you don't really think about, like how do games or how do like our setups interact across a whole like plethora of hardware configurations, which is the bane of PC development. Is like my computer is different than Kyle's computer, which is different than Bianca's computer, which is different from everybody else's. So like, how do you even possibly test all of those various different hardware configurations and like account for all of those is really, really hard.
That's cool. Yeah, man, game dev is hard.
You're gonna have like the monster who plays on PC who's gonna attach like a Quest 3 or a PlayStation VR 1 headset to their computer and play in VR in like theater mode, and you're like, no,
Please don't do that.
count.
Someone who bioengineered an Acer laptop with the Raspberry Pi, and it's like, this is the aspect ratio of my little computer. Yeah.
Do you guys have any games you've played just in your, just gameplay history where the game is just like, have you played a game that's just super broken before?
Yeah, my
Really,
question was, what's the most broken game that you've paid for? Because like a free
Yeah.
game, if it's super broken, that's one thing. But what's the most broken game you've paid for?
I did early access for Baldur's Gate in 2020.
Ooh, wow.
That was really broken.
Dang.
And then I didn't touch it until it released. Like, that's how broken it was. Like, I was like, I'm just gonna forget about you until 4-5 years later, and then everyone's like, it's released, and I'm like, cool. Let me update 100 gigs of files.
Oh man. So what
that was a
about
really
what were
broken
things
game,
you were
but I
running
kept-
into?
It's just like, the animations for like the characters would be like really disturbing. Like, you'd be talking to Lizelle at the first scene of the intro, and her mouth would just go slackjaw and be like, "Ugh,"
Yeah.
And then it just like, it was like a lot of visual, not being able to exit. The combat for the intro was at least an hour long on the ship. If anyone's played it, it was longer than the 1-2 spots. It was like 1-2-3. You go above the ship and then through the ship, and it's like, it was a lot more combat and things like that. So I think that's like one of the games that it's very popular now, but it was like early access. It was very, very rough. I think any early access game is, and as developers, we give them kind of like a grace because we've all been there, so it's good. Yeah.
For me, it's probably a tie between Anthem and Cyberpunk, but like a couple years after Cyberpunk still. So those two are probably up there for me.
Yeah, we were actually just talking about Anthem, I think last week, because they are finally like killing it, like the
Sunsetting it,
support.
yeah.
I think it died this week. Yeah, it died on Monday or Tuesday.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still haven't gotten around to Cyberpunk, but I definitely saw all of those videos that people were compiling of just the weird stuff that was happening. But that's kind of a testament too of even a studio that like really knows their stuff. With The Witcher, you dive into a new genre and it's like you don't expect 90% of the things that you're going to have to account for. But I don't know. I guess they didn't have a great QA team.
It's not necessarily they didn't have a great QA team. It was just that like there's so much variation that like, and you have to at some point, and this is the kind of the problem that like every studio runs into. You do have to say enough at some point.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of live with the decisions of like, you know what? It sucks, but it ain't that bad. We can launch with it. And like as a producer being the one oftentimes who's making that decision, it sucks.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to be the guy who's like, no, I have to like, like even like we do triage here on Aether and Iron, and there's a bug and it's like a narrative bug. And sometimes it's like, we have to change like a single line, and maybe it's like one line of like one word of dialogue. And I'm like, no, we've recorded the voiceover. It's gone off to localization. Narrative is like, can be really, really passionate about like trying to argue, like, and change my mind of like, it's like so critical that like this character says this thing instead of what they're currently saying. And I'm like, sorry, Corporate Cody says no. I would
Yeah.
love to, but at some point, it's just like, is it worth the hundreds and or thousands of dollars to bring an actor back into the voiceover booth to record one line of dialogue to change it in this game? Like, there's nothing else we have for them to do. They're literally coming in, and I have to pay them for a minimum amount of time, the studio for a minimum amount of time, the editors for a minimum amount of time. Like, all these things like cost money. Is that a $3,000 fix? Are we going to get $3,000 worth of like better reviews or player sentiment or what have you, whatever positive return on that do you want to measure it by? Are you going to get that? And the answer is probably not.
Yeah. I think
so,
that's
like,
one of the most. It's one of the most important things, though, to learn from game to game, though, is like process and how you can become more efficient to negate as many of those things as possible. That's why it's kind of confusing to me that I understand. I totally agree and understand with what you're saying about at a certain point you got to just be like, ah, it's good enough kind of thing. But they, CD Projekt Red released 3 other games before Cyberpunk, so what could have gone wrong in their process to allow for such egregious issues? You know.
I think one of the things we have to
Just
remember,
the
like,
nature. Yeah.
with Cyberpunk was that a lot of the issues that people were complaining about, and it's not to say like the PC was immune to this, because definitely it had its own problems, was that a lot of the memes and the jokes about like the brokenness of the game were on the PS4 and the Xbox One, like the base versions of those consoles, not the pro versions, but the base versions, and people running min spec PCs.
Gotcha.
When you're running a higher spec PC where you can run like medium or higher or what have you, or maybe you're on a min spec PC and you're like, no, I want to see this thing like fully cranked out, give me all the ray tracing, no DLSS, no help, and then you play the game and then like it's broken. A lot of the times, a lot of those issues are spawned from that, and it's performance. It's a lot of like, not necessarily surface level, but like it's a lot of like deep rooted issues from performance on like min spec and low spec hardware that cause a lot of this stuff, and that's the stuff that's really hard to fix, because like when you're doing performance optimization, you have to make trade-offs and compromises to increase the performance. So like something is going to look like a potato in exchange for the game being able to run. Like I remember I was doing min spec testing on Apple for Dragon Age Origins way back when. And we were working with another studio to do the Mac ports because we didn't have the team in-house. And the min spec that we had decided was some random Mac Mini from like 2006 or 2007. So I remember one day my boss comes up to me. He's like, hands me a Mac. He's like, you know how to use an Apple or a Mac? And I was like, yep. He's like, congratulations. You've inherited this project. It's yours now.
Oh, man.
And
It's great
it
how that
took
always happens.
me on like the average FPS on that Mac Mini was like 1 to 3 FPS. So what would normally take me maybe a day or two to do like a full natural playthrough of Dragon Age Origins took me over a month, because it was just that chunky and that slow. And like I'm filing bugs of like performance is hitting like 100% CPU usage, 120% CPU usage. This is probably bad. Can we not ship this?
Yeah.
And they're like, it technically runs, and there's going to be like 1 or 2 people in the world on Mac, on this particular Mac Mini, who are going to be playing this game if you're lucky. So no. And then I remember the last boss fight against the Archdemon took me a week by itself, just because it was that slow, and for me to like react and do anything, I was getting like basically 1 frame every minute, roughly.
Jeez.
It was really rough, and it was like, good enough. It runs. That's all we asked you to test if it did. Like you finished the game on this, and sure, it took you 3 weeks, but you did it.
Especially if you have to ship on that console. Yeah. And
Oh, yeah.
like I remember one of the first indie games I worked on, a beautiful game called Rhyme. It was like we had to ship on the first iteration of the Switch. And there was issues where that game wouldn't run as great, and you'd be like, this is such a beautiful game, but it's not. Like it was designed in Unreal, like it was made for Unreal. And then when the Switch 2 came out recently, we're like, it fixed all the issues. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like that Switch 2, it finally, from the original Switch to the Switch 2, that was when it actually got fixed. And I think speaking on like that lens, it could be hardware, or it could be even like the engine itself. Like I think we were talking about the Uncharted series, earlier today and was like, I was watching one of their GDC talks, and it was like, Uncharted 1 was made with the same engine as Jack and Dexter, you know? And when you think about those
That's
games,
crazy.
Jack and Dexter, Uncharted 1,
Yeah.
it's not the same. And they were trying to do AI pathing, and they had the same, like, restrictions as Jack and Dexter, which is why Uncharted 1 is it's a great game, but it's the way it is because it was on an engine that was technically older than what was available.
Wow, that's
So,
amazing.
yeah, it was just things
Yeah.
like that. Kind of just, we got to remember, like, when did they start actually working on this? Is it the latest engine, or is it, it's just kind of those caveats that kind of restrict games as they, get
Yeah.
released.
Time is such a huge factor, right? Like,
Mhm.
and I think like games that do end up taking a while to come out, like 6, 7, 8 years, we're generally oftentimes a lot more critical of the bugs or like the feature completeness of the game when it does come out. But we have to like I can't speak to the Cyberpunk, for example, but I imagine like they restarted that game probably several times
Yeah.
within that
Yeah.
like 7 or 8 year time span from when they announced to when it finally came out. I guarantee you at least probably 2 or 3 kind of like either hard or soft resets on that game. I remember like worked on Dragon Age 2. You compare like Dragon Age, going from Dragon Age Origins to Dragon Age 2 can be hard because Dragon Age Origins was in development for about 7 or 8 years. They made the whole game in Neverwinter Nights, decided that like that engine was old and they needed to fix it, so they ported it
Yeah.
to a new engine that they had made,
Wow.
which they called Lyrium, I think. But like at BioWare, somewhere in a repo somewhere, there is a fully playable version of Dragon Age Origins, script complete, that matches what came out in Neverwinter Nights, which is wild. And then Dragon Age 2, we made in 42 weeks, start to finish. That game was 42 weeks long of development. Like it's insane when you compare like 7 years of DAO, 7 years of Inquisition, and then DA2 is 42 weeks. So like,
What? How?
yeah, like that was the timeline we had. That's what it was.
It's
And
also
then-
mechanically so different from the first
It
one.
is. So DA2 was supposed to be like a standalone expansion pack to DA Origins initially. And Mark Dara has done a lot of talks on this on his YouTube channel, which if you're interested in game development, I highly recommend, or like BioWare's history. Highly recommend. He's done a really good job at like talking about how things at BioWare went from like where they started to where they ended up, and then like some of the drama that's happened behind the scenes. Like he has a 3-hour talk on Anthem that he's released recently, which is really good.
Interesting.
But DA2 started off as like a standalone expansion pack for DAO that was supposed to bridge the gameplay from Origins to what we wanted to do initially in Inquisition, which was much more action-y. So DA2 was like this bridge to that point. It started off, was called Dragon Age Exodus. And then, at some point, scope started to increase on it. We started to, eventually there was a decision to call it Dragon Age 2 because, marketing big bucks, it's gonna be recognized more and sell more as like a proper sequel rather than an expansion pack. Cause like we were leaving the era of the expansion pack behind us, like your StarCraft Brood Wars or your like World of Warcraft expansions. Like they were they it's a different vibe to do an expansion than it is to do a full-fledged sequel. So we wanted to do like a bridge in terms of gameplay to like, it's still kind of like Origins, but it's definitely a lot more action-y. And then we had a compressed timeline. So we're like, okay, let's do a frame narrative where you're basically telling the story of one character over 10 years in the same city, so we can reuse those similar assets. Like you go to the same place over and over again. We make slight alterations or slight changes to the landscape so that it doesn't feel exactly the same, but like they're really small. And that's like how we crammed, a Dragon Age story within 42 weeks, was that we had to limit and get really creative with our storytelling and our environmental design and our game design to kind of accommodate that. And yeah, I mean, like the end result definitely shows that it was a game made in 42 weeks. Like it's rough around the edges.
It's a pretty lengthy game, though, from what I remember.
It's still like a 20, 30 hour long game. It tells a really cool and unique story that like they've never done quite the same since. But like, it's rough. but it's done and it's complete. And I always will be able to hang the badge on the wall of like, technically I worked on BioWare's most profitable game.
Was it?
And no one will
Oh, I
ever
guess
take it
because if it's
yeah,
such a
because
quick
most of their games
turnaround,
take-
yeah.
Most of their games take 5 to 7 years
Wow.
or
It's
longer.
always good to have that.
Dragon Age
Yeah.
2 is 42 weeks. So like even if we had 300 or 400 people working on Dragon Age 2 in a year, that still costs a lot less than 100 people or less over 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I did not know that.
Yeah. Because like it's sold
Actually-
comparably to, if I recall correctly, like it's sold comparably to Dragon Age Origins.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
a little bit less, but like pretty comparably. So like all things considered, the game was a success. I think review wise, it like finished somewhere around the 80 Metacritic mark, which I think is pretty good all like for what that game is. But the cool thing is like I remember like when it came out, a lot of my friends were like just kind of dumping on it because it felt rushed. It didn't feel like a sequel to Dragon Age Origins. It felt reduced in scope. It felt smaller. It didn't feel what your normal sequel would give you, which is bigger, bolder, better. Which we got in Inquisition, I think, which is kind of what a lot of people consider to be the proper Dragon Age 2. But like in the years since, I've had a lot of people who find out that I worked on Dragon Age 2 come up to me like, that is my favorite game.
I really liked it.
That is my
Isn't that
favorite
such a
game
great
of all time
feeling?
is Dragon Age 2.
Isn't that a great feeling?
Yeah, and like that's the feel good vibes. Like you go from like a lot of people didn't like Dragon Age 2 to like there are people out there who like consider it their best game of all time, and that's a cool feeling. And they like point to elements on the game that you worked on, or like maybe you were directly responsible for, even as QA.
Yeah.
And they're like, I loved this piece, and you're like, oh yeah, like I had input on that, like I contributed to that. That's really neat.
Yeah.
That's like
I
the
think
feel good vibes. That's like the
Yeah.
right. I remember why I make video games now. Like it's
Yeah.
because of that.
Mhm.
It's
And
just like you
sometimes
want to
it's-
bring people joy. Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
fun. Especially when it's your coworkers. I think it's such a cool feeling when like one of our coworkers is like, "You worked on this game? Like I love that game." And it's like,
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
yeah, it's always real fun.
So do you guys find yourselves as you're playing games, like just for leisure, you're kind of like debugging things constantly? Like, has it ruined games for you in a sense? Kyle's shaking his head.
I would say
I-
it's ruined it, but there was a stretch where like I would have a notebook handy when I was playing games, and I would write notes of like my thoughts and feelings on the games, or like how they made things, like questions to ask, or like they did X, Y, and Z. Can we do X, Y, and Z in our game? Would that help? Like, and I attribute that to like a test that I had to do at BioWare for like a position I was applying for, where they're like play through all of BioShock in a weekend, and I journaled BioShock from start to finish, and that just became like a trend I did for a while. I don't do it as much anymore now that I have a kiddo and we just play games and have fun. But like the artsy part of me who's like, oh, I went to film school and I'm all pretentious and like I'm in the industry and I need to like be doing all these cool things to like justify my existence in what I'm doing. I had that phase, and I'm happy I'm past that phase now. But like there was a part of my life where I was hypercritical about what I played and like wanted to understand like how it was made and break it down. And I still do that like in my head, but it's from like a part of more like Inquisition or
do they do that?
inquisitiveness than it is from
Yeah, it's
like
great.
criticalness, which I think is a much healthier spot to be.
Like that switch is always really good. I think I don't think it's ruined games for me. I think it's more giving me like perspective on like, especially when you worked on like engine stuff and you're like, man, it took me so long to figure out how to get something as simple as like bats flying and bats combat, a swarm of bats flying to attack the player and to make it look organic and natural. And it's just like trying to figure out those things for yourself, especially if you work at a place that didn't have a legacy of engines, or a legacy to choose from different tools to make it easier. And you're having to start things, fresh yourself. It's just like, it kind of doesn't ruin it, but it's like it gives you a new perspective. You're more appreciative of the games that you do have, that you do play. But there's some things that I'm like, I see this issue. And then you're just like, I think this is how this works. Or you're talking to your friend and you're like, well, this is definitely this side. And it's like, it's not really their fault. That it's probably, engine related, or, it can't be, the environment artist's fault that you're getting stuck on collision when they don't really do it could be an environment designer, rather than the artist. So it's just like things like that. But I don't know, it's kind of, I still love games. I love playing different genres, especially as I pursued other aspects of my career, like going more into design or going more into art. It was just like grabbing things, living through games, getting experiences. Those are like the best moments. So you know, being a developer doesn't change that, whether you're on that side or this side.
Yeah.
Do you file bug reports when you come across a bug in a game?
I did yesterday. But in my defense, the game crashed like 7 times. So I was like, you're getting all 7 of these logs immediately. And I'm typing crash, consistent, 100% repo, do this, send. Like, I think that like those, if I'm seeing like a visual art bug, I'm like, they probably know it exists, but if it's like a very specific niche thing, like I put a broken tool into a chest, and when I open that chest, the game doesn't work anymore. Like that. It could have just slipped through the cracks of, that's an edge case. So it's like that thing. I just filed a bug, and if that conversation was coming up, I knew I was gonna have to mention it. But yeah, literally yesterday, I did that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I remember once I used my like insider connections at BioWare, like after I'd left the company, I was playing Mass Effect 3. And I had the DLC for the Prothean, and I had their like crazy beam weapon. And I remember I was breaking the game all over with the beam weapon. Like I was managing to like do enough damage to like bypass like conditional triggers in combat that would like flag and like hit like certain cutscenes. And I would be like, I'd message like my friends on the QA team on Mass Effect 3 and be like, hey, can you file a bug for me on like this? Because like I totally broken the game like 7 times. And they'd be like, yeah.
It's always great when you could just text somebody and be like, hey.
Yeah. I don't want to I don't want to do your job for you, but
yeah.
Yeah. That's the best. I was helping out, like I have friends over in a different studio, and they're like, hey, you should check out our survival crafting game, see how it is. Just try it out. And I'm like, yeah, totally. And the first thing I did was try to shoot someone, and they're like, oh, we took PvP out, sorry, like it wasn't fitting our game. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. And then just by messing around, just by messing with their systems, I made a pistol that did 1 million poison damage per bullet. And they took out hurting other people with bullets, but not with status ailments. So in front of everyone, I'm like, hey, check this out. And I shot a guy and killed him. And they're like, how did you murder someone? What is that? What are you doing? And I'm like, that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, or environmental effects is really good too. Like if you hurt someone via the environment, did you change that? Nope. There you go. Another flag.
So much fun.
Yeah.
This is just how I play games, so like nothing changed for me. If anything, I got better at ruining things. So
yeah, it's like, do we want to be evil? Yes, it's fine.
So are you guys able to like exploit games better now because you kind of know what to look for? Yeah.
Yeah. I try not to do it, but yeah.
Do you?
Yeah. Especially if it benefits me, like a survival game. I'm like, if I keep spamming this and getting a lot of health potions, so I don't have to craft them, it's your fault you left it in there at that point.
Yeah.
But the crash book, I'm sending that immediately. Like,
I take that stance all the time. You left it in, I'm exploiting it.
Yeah.
So Alex asked a really good question in chat that I feel like this is a good question for like just like how has development changed you? But he asked, what are some aspects that you have found you feel much more appreciative of about when playing games now since getting experience in the industry? I don't think it's necessarily like something I necessarily feel appreciative of, but one thing that's really changed me since being in the industry is I'm a lot more compassionate and patient with games now than I used to be when I was younger. Like you understand that like the small miracle that happens on a daily basis when a build happens and you get a successful build. When you have an understanding of like the effort and passion and just overall like time commitment and just like life commitment it takes to make a video game from start to finish, kind of opens up your eyes to like the patience. Like when you do encounter a bug in the wild, when you do encounter issues in the wild, I'm like, yeah, that sucks, but like, I'm not going to get super mad about it.
Yeah.
Like, I'll tell them about it. Like, yeah, like, here's a bug here, and it, like, I'm stuck and would appreciate some help. But like, just the level of patience that I have now when I play games of like, yeah, it's probably gonna be broken on release, and like, it's not great, but like, them's the breaks. And if I want to be an early adopter, I get it. Like, I'm buying into this, and that's part of the gig now. And like I guess some people are upset about that. They want a finished or they want a polished product on release because that's how it used to work because games were smaller in
within a
scope.
year.
Like, I think a lot of people are really kind of disconnect of like we've been escalating game complexity and game size now since for forever since games were born. Like you play Pong or Atari Adventure now versus Grand Theft Auto or Uncharted or even Aether and Iron, and like it's vastly more complex.
Oh yeah,
with like huge teams working on these things, and like there are going to be things that slip through the cracks, and like I think past me in some capacity wouldn't have necessarily like been angry about it, but like would have been more frustrated. And current me is like, dang, that sucks. I'll help him out. I'm gonna file a bug. Like just like the patience and the appreciation for the work that goes in, I think is a big thing that's changed for me since getting into development. Yeah, for me, that's.
Do you
that's the
think
big
there's
thing.
something to be said though about games getting maybe too complex and too ambitious and too open that like is kind of detracting from the medium in general if they're being released with this many issues? And it's like, well, if you would have just reined in your scope, maybe you would have had more time and more energy to like make it feel more finished. Because I've definitely played a lot of games in the past decade where I felt like that, where I'm like, this game didn't, I would have rather the game been 20 hours than 100 hours, but had more of the soul injected into it than just like the side quests to just waste your time, for example.
Odds are, yeah, someone at the top probably made that decision. It not always, it can't always be the developers. It could be someone who, pushes a lot of what gets made, and that could have probably been the issue. Like, there's just so many different variables when it goes into game development that I think a lot of us have game development graveyards. Games that would never see the light of day. And honestly, as much as I, want to be like, you could have just done this. It's like I'm just thankful for the games that did get made.
Yeah.
That we can say, hey, I did work on that game, because I think I worked on like 5 projects in the past like 3 years that it was a great game, but then funding was cut or they went in a different direction, and I think that's probably why it's just as much as I'm like as long as the game gets made and somebody like can enjoy it
Yeah.
at some, because you're not going to please everybody at the end of the day. There's some people who want linear games. There's some people who need linear games, whether they're able-bodied to play that or not. There's different variables in people's lives that determine that. Or people who love open world games. I think my dad is one of them, and he's like, I love Bethesda,
Yeah.
I love Skyrim, and it's like, I love my dad, and it's like, that's, I'm like, one day I'll work at Bethesda, Dad, don't worry. But it's just like, I think it's just like at the end of the day, you're like, like, of course, different decisions could have been made to make these games, more polished. We could throw, more money at it and still not get that polish that you need. It just depends on, who's there, who's making the games, and who's actually making the decisions for that.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think like I remember when Baldur's Gate 3 came out, and there was a lot of talk of like, why isn't every game Baldur's Gate 3?
Yeah.
And for me, I had a lot of like internal worry of like, crap, the game I'm working on isn't Baldur's Gate 3. Everyone's gonna hate it. In terms of like its scope and scale, but like you really have to take a step back and like I remember there was a lot of arguments online about this when the game did come out of like some devs being like, please, for the love of God, don't compare us to Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah.
And I think like from a player point of view, I get like the want of like I want all my games to have the level of reactivity and variability that game has because it's super fun and like it's great and it's awesome. But like not every game needs to have that. Like not every game does need to be Baldur's Gate 3 in terms of its complexity and its reactivity and how open it feels. And like massive props and kudos to Larian for making that game because I think it is incredible and it's a massive achievement. But like you have to look at like the world in which that game was made in. Like they worked for several years, I think 3 or 4 before they announced it, or like 2 or 3 before they announced it, and then another 3 or 4 until they released it into early access. And then another 3 or 4 from early access to full launch. Like that game was like probably 10 years in the making at least. And they did the early access thing that Larian always does, which, like helps fund developments. And not every game can do that. And not every game benefits from it. Sometimes early access can be a death knell because your game wasn't ready and you didn't have maybe an established IP that you could lean on that, or like maybe history that you could lean on that would keep players engaged and involved and wanting to pay to test the game, essentially. So like for every Baldur's Gate, there's like 300 other games that were trying to be somewhat similar to that never took off the ground, never found their footing, crumpled under their own complexity and their own kind of like wants and feelings to kind of be whatever their initial vision was. And yeah, it's tough out there.
Yeah. I mean, the Divinity Original Sin 2 is not even Baldur's Gate, and that was their previous game right before that, and it doesn't even have they're night and day games. But that's the whole reason why I actually played Baldur's Gate 3 was because of Divinity Original Sin 2. And you can't even compare their own games to themselves because they're so different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Gina, we got any other questions we want to go over before we close out?
I was just checking the chat, and it looks like Alex did make some more comments, but no more questions. So I think that is it for this week. But did definitely want to thank Bianca and Kyle for joining us, and of course Cody as well.
Yeah, thank you guys. That was a fun talk. And to everyone that is watching right now, just remember that we do host these live on Discord, so you can feel free to join us and chat with us. And we will see you guys next week. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, and tell us in the comments what's the most broken game that you paid for.
Yes.
Yeah, unkept.
Yeah, and
Unkept,
kept, yes.
That's pretty good.
All right, guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
See ya.
Yeah, later. Bye-bye.